Are you ready otherwise? Everything good? Thank you. Welcome everybody to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee meeting for June 16th, now 6:30 p.m. We acknowledge with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, and we're honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with people of the Songhees and Swepsum nations. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Agenda. Approval of the agenda. Tonight's agenda. A mover. Thank you, Councillor Day. No second required. Anyone opposed? Any issues arising? Nothing. Perfect. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. So we have a previous set of minutes from April 22nd. Someone, thank you, Councillor Day, moves that. Anyone opposed? I guess I should call discussion first. No discussion. Anyone opposed to those minutes? Thank you so much. Public participation. This time I'd like to invite members of the public or member of the public here in the gallery. If you have something you would like to address the committee on, you're good. Thank you so much. Anyone online, Madam Corporate Officer? Thank you so much. New business. Tyler. Can't wait to see your matrix and so you can explain it to me.
If I may, Chair, I'll start us off here.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Staff are really looking forward to bringing this topic to the committee. Historically, our department has dealt with, I guess, initiatives or questions from the public around and through our traffic calming policy. As we've received more and more complaints over time and tracked those, we found that those I guess, inquiries and questions have broadened away from just traffic calming to crosswalks and bike lanes and sidewalks and many more things. From that arose staff's request to council this last financial planning period for the 2025 to 2029 financial plan to bring forward the transportation safety initiatives program. So council passed that this last year. And as part of that, there's funding now for a program to address some of those issues in our community. So if there's a sidewalk, anything else that comes up that people want to see in their community or in their neighborhoods, they can bring those forward. Then comes the question about analyzing those and equity inside of the community and technically evaluating those things. So like I said before, we've used our traffic calming policy previously, and we noticed some I guess, projects that would come forward that needed a little bit more technical analysis. So staff have been working on what's going to be shown to you tonight, which is a matrix that we can put some of these inquiries through and get some technical feedback as to a rating or a scoring. So we can start to compare these and look at severity, necessity, and what we might do, and then look to bring those projects back to council. So tonight, what we're doing is sharing that criteria with you. I'll give it over to my colleagues here on my right to go through some of those details. Like I said before, really looking forward to bringing these to you, this new tool. And I wanted to highlight the work we're doing with the TMP and how this sort of links into that. During the financial plan review, we also had the Vision Zero come forward, so there's initiative there. And from that, we've already had as a deliverable this year, a road safety report, which brought forward a lot of data, which helps us to evaluate some of these and also feeds back again into that TMP process. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Tyler Pettipies and Jennifer Smith to walk you through all the work they've done, and look forward to how we get through this evening together. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joshua, for the kind words. And yes, so if you haven't met me, my name is Tyler Pettipies. I'm the engineering capital projects lead here at Colwood in our engineering department. And I'm joined by Jennifer Smith, engineering coordinator in our engineering department. We've both worked on this a lot in collaboration with a lot of staff here. Yeah, and we're really excited to present this to you. We did put together a presentation. Not to worry, there's no additional information here outside of what was already spoken in the report. We just found that the visuals be a nice bit more exciting to look at while we're talking through the program. So we wanted to start by just giving a sort of introduction to the program. And yeah, I've got a thing here, so I'll just run through it. So we're just going to talk about an introduction to the Traffic Safeties Initiative program. We're going to seek committee's recommendation to council today for endorsement of the evaluation framework, which is where you keep hearing the term the matrix. So that was in Appendix 1 in the report for this committee meeting, which talked about the different scoring criteria. After that, as Joshua said, we'll be looking to come back with a prioritized project list and seek to utilize funding to implement. Just a bit of background on the strategic alignment of this initiative. As discussed in the report, it aligns with the infrastructure and well-being strategic priorities and the OCP objectives of improving safety, comfort, convenience, walking for all ages and abilities, and improving that for cycling and both pedestrians in our network. Just some background on the report. Just gonna find this slide. Oh yeah, so as Joshua spoke to previously, we do receive a high volume of resident reported traffic safety concerns. Just for context, we implemented our Tempest software in 2023, and that really allowed us to start tracking these things and these concerns and being able to visualize how many we receive. And since then, we've received about 99 different traffic safety concerns. So it really just justified that we need to come up with a formalized and objective way of looking at all these and prioritizing them in an equitable fashion. In this background slide, you can see this heat map isn't something that we've created. We just wanted to provide an example from a report that we received from Urban Systems. This just shows collisions in Colwood, but this is something that we can provide in the future in collaboration with GIS to talk about complaints that we receive throughout the city. So just wanted to provide some background information on all the different documents that have gone into the creation of this matrix. We've really tried to derive as much technical data into creating objective matrix criteria. And here's an example of a lot of those. Just to list a few is our policy documents, such as the ATMP and TMP. We also dive into TAC and geometric design standards, traffic and highways bylaw, and we also utilize as much information we can find from other municipalities that might be implementing similar programs. So the scoring matrix breaks it down into 4 different categories: existing conditions and user comfort, land use and context, street character, and traffic. And we apply that to 3 different treatments, which is bike lanes, sidewalks, crosswalks, and traffic calming. So here's an example that we wanted to show where we've applied this criteria to 2 examples that we received of many. And just to sort of give an example of what that looks like within the matrix. Although we're here tonight to speak about the criteria, I did want to provide sort of a preview of what that'll look like when we eventually return with the projects. So the examples are Kelly Road and Marlene Drive. Kelly Road, you see things like high levels of pedestrian and cyclist activity. It's a playground zone, has a transit stop. And then Marlene, which is, the picture shows a straight alignment, but at the very end, there's a curve when it connects to Aldine, where we have concerns about frequent speeding. And this is an extract image of what it looks like in the matrix, where we have each of those different criteria and how they score. So as you can see, something like Kelly Road, where they want traffic calming, this allows us to prioritize concerns based on all this criteria. I'll move on to next steps. Yep.
Thank you, Tyler. Councillor Day.
Yeah, I just, when I was looking at this, I couldn't decide if more points were better or worse.
It's a good question. Yes, more points means that there is a higher need for this initiative. This is the philosophy of it. So for this example, we can look at something, I'm looking for a high score here. So street type, something like 0.11 there, street type. It's got a 3 because Kelly is an arterial road and Marlene is a 1 because it's a local road. And I should have said this at the very start. I've appended, or we've appended 18 extra slides to this presentation in case we want to talk through each of these categories individually. But yeah, that's just where we can really dive into the details about why a project would receive a higher score than another one. But in general speaking, the higher the score, the higher priority it is to address. Please. Yeah. Okay, so next steps. So we're here tonight to hopefully receive your recommendation for endorsement from council. Once council endorse the criteria, then we will apply this criteria to all the projects that we've received requests for, and then return with that prioritized list for implementation. And I believe Josh already spoke to, we do have $100,000 budget this year to implement the top priority projects. So this is the recommendation. I'm sure you've already read it. We don't have to read it again in detail. But I just want to say thank you for listening. And the next 18 slides are the appendix slides for all of each criteria. But I wanted to open up if you had any extra questions.
Why don't we see where the questions take us, and then we can circle back. Is that Dawn? Dawn, thank you, Dawn. You're, hang on a second here. There you go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Actually, when I read through this, I do applaud your ability to go through this. I actually do this in my day job as well to try to prioritize projects as well. So it makes it very objective. So it's a really good step for the city. A couple of quick questions around when you go through the prioritization matrix, there's always a level of objectivity or subjectivity, sorry, that goes into these, even when you're trying to stay objective. So it's just from the staffing perspective, you've broken down a lot of the criteria. It's very easy to tell which way it goes. But at the end, when you have two projects, you have $100,000 and you have two projects that are probably going to cost $60,000 each, and they're both 30 or they're both 40. How do you then go through the next level of criteria to decide which one is going to get the priority over the second one? Because you can only have one number one, one number two, whereas we all tend to run with 15 number ones and run from there.
Yeah, great question, because we haven't yet gotten into that and seeing or observing all the scoring and how it compares. But once we do have that list, we'll be returning to council and sort of providing that information to council for them to tell us what they would like to see for priority projects for this year at least. And perhaps John has additional information.
Yeah, part of the reasoning behind this is to give council an ability to kind of weigh that higher priority projects. I mean, it's unlikely that one project is really going to be massively ahead of others. And in fact, what's going to happen, because we've got 4 different categories, is you might see a traffic calming at 30, a bike lane at 28, a crosswalk at 32, and then it becomes more of a social decision. You know, what seems to fit the needs of the community better. And you might say, and something we've talked about with regards to the evolution of the program, is whether we want to weight some of the criteria and say, okay, around schools, if we're going to use the school criteria piece, we're going to multiply whatever number that is by 2 to establish that that's a higher concern with regards to council and where they're trying to take this initiative. Or they might say, okay, anytime it's a crosswalk, we want to, multiply it by 1.5 because we feel like pedestrian crossings are at the highest part of our list. So that might separate kind of the wheat from the chaff. So we're looking at those things, but ultimately what will happen is council will kind of have a choice. Do you want to do these two, this one, these three? And because it's an ongoing program at 500,000 over the next 5 years, there might be a time where they go, okay, let's pull money forward to get two of these key projects done in 1 year that add up to say 120,000. Or let's hold some money back and only do one project for 60, push it into next year so we can do this really important project for 140. So that's where that next iteration with regards to talking to council and seeing if there's a specific way they want to lean. So certainly if you have comments on that with regards to what do you think are more important criteria to maybe lean on, I'm sure council would be interested in that as well.
Thank you. Just to wrap around, just a moment, Councillor Day, along the same lines. I had a thought and it's left me now. We'll move to Councillor Day.
Thanks. I think that we are on a good track to creating a somewhat less passionate list than we might otherwise create. Because we all want to do everything yesterday, but the school issue really jumped out at me as something that isn't all that well represented in the criteria, simply because there are some crossing points. Generally, when I think about them, they're particularly associated where we've had crossing guards for schools. Souk Road crossing at Aldine, no, not Aldine. The one that goes down to the church there. Mount View, that's the one that jumped out in my mind, because we've had a number of presentations over the years from residents concerned about the kids crossing the street and vehicles not stopping for that light. And, you know, that's been kind of the justification behind some of the push for continued crossing guards in different areas. Machosen Road, of course, has the crossing guards there that are quite critical to Sangster School. And so where a roadway that we might be looking at under this criteria is kind of part of a safe route to school scenario, I thought there should be something in our criteria to reflect that. And the other thing that I noticed, and I kind of get a little bit stuck on it, is where there's a steep grade versus where it's fairly flat. For cycling, I would rather build out the routes that are more likely to be used sooner than those. I mean, it is a double-edged sword because that's like the safety issue if you're trying to go up Fulton Road or down Lagoon Road. But then there's also build it, you know, with our limited resources, and then maybe very few people would use it. So I know it's a double-edged sword, but I just wonder if you considered that when you were creating your matrix.
Yeah, happy to answer that. That first one on the safe routes to schools is a fantastic criteria. Grades in terms of this matrix are utilized for, it's essentially for prioritizing the safety of a person that's utilizing this infrastructure. So for example, actually, this one. So something like Machosen Road, where you see steep grades in the TAC geometric design guidelines. Steeper grades do affect the stopping capabilities of vehicles. So that is one criteria that would actually increase the need for infrastructure if it was a crosswalk. For example, given the higher need for safety on a steep grade. But what you were speaking about was grades for cyclists that might be going uphill or downhill. And that's something I've written down and that we're gonna definitely look at in our next version. Thank you.
I remember what I was gonna ask, Tyler, and I wrote it down as soon as I remembered it. The subjectivity that Dawn mentioned. I mean, how are you guys doing this? Is this around the table, or are we doing like a double blind engineering staff scoring matrix and then comparing notes? Like what, or is this fall to one person? Like whose subjectivity are we running with here?
Thank you for the question. I think that's one of the big purposes of this is to try to remove subjectivity. So inside of the appendix that you should have appended to the report itself, it's got those criteria broken out. So the intent is, and we will use this and go through a couple of different staff will do it and compare, but the idea is they should come out with the same results. So we're trying to remove that subjectivity at this level and just keep it to technical with instructions on how to evaluate. So, you know, are they on a priority network? Yes, no, they get a 2. Great. So it's trying to move forward and really remove that. Well, I think they're inside of this, or they might be in proximity. Well, I think it's no. It's just yes, no, black, white. Really comfortable for engineers to use black, white thinking, you know? So that's the goal of this tool. Now, reviewing this and looking through and removing that subjectivity is definitely, you know, something we need to look at. So if you're seeing that in here, if you're feeling like there's subjectivity, that's something we want to talk about tonight for sure. And then I think that comes to the equal scoring and is there weighting and things like that. That's more subjective. And honestly, that layer of that social aspect of, is it a neighborhood here or part of the community there? What do we want to layer in there?
Gotcha.
We're trying to stay technical and sort of that black, white,
Yeah.
on, off, yes, no type
I
thing.
was gonna make an engineer joke in there somewhere about how much you like
Exactly.
the gray.
Yeah, when you get a chance to really look at the matrix itself, it basically is either an area clear cut, it's this size, it's that size, a length, it's this size, it's this length, it's that length. It's so far from a school and they're very defined numbers. It's 250 meters or it's under 400 meters or it's over 400 meters. So a lot of it is objective. Like Joshua said, the subjectivity will come into whether you want to take these objective numbers and tweak them. Because council's saying these are the priorities of the community, like schools and safer routes for kids. And you go, okay, this is great. We love the objectivity of it. But so when somebody calls and complains about a crosswalk and it's nowhere near a school,
Right.
and then somebody else calls and complains about a crosswalk that's near a school, that will very quickly get elevated over the first one, even though the first one might say have more traffic or similar traffic, but because it's closer to a school, it's going to elevate quicker. So that's where the subjectivity comes in with council with regards to, okay, let's put a multiplier in there or some kind of designation. But as far as looking at each piece of a criteria, it basically is just number and or area driven by length or areas. So I don't see too much subjectivity
I
there.
like it. And we'll circle back to that because I think just the flavor of this committee is maybe a suggestion and maybe we'll add an amendment with regard to schools and parks. Someone can start chewing on that. Mr. Lacey, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tyler. This is great. Appreciate staff putting all the effort in for this. My comments are just a couple of suggestions, furthering what Councillor Days mentioned about heat maps and generating the data. So I understand Urban Systems was the company that generated what you have so far. Is that right? Or with the GIS data?
Urban Systems generated that example that we
Okay.
provided of a heat map, but
Yeah.
the entire program is staff driven.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to suggest two other sources for volumes of pedestrians and cyclists. One is Strava. I'm not sure if the city has looked at any heat mapping data from Strava that shows walking and running and cycling. I know it's been of use in other cities in the past. They've consulted some of that heat maps for activity. And also there's an organization that started out of UVic called Bike Maps and Walk Maps, or Walk and Roll Map. And it's a voluntary report website that's created by a nonprofit. And it basically it's something that you can just fill out on a website anonymously to just talk about near misses or crashes, whether you're walking, rolling, or on a bike. So that might be another good because they have heat maps and they also have incident, like figures on incidents that have happened, near misses or collisions at certain intersections. You can just jump on there and it gives you descriptions, time, day, and all the weather related stuff as well. So I just want to suggest a couple other sources of information. It's walk and roll map.
Walk and roll.
Walk map, yep. Walk map and bike map.org.
Strava, is that publicly available then?
Yes,
Is it
so
down-
Strava, it's publicly available, but you just have to pay a subscription to get access to the heat mapping.
Thank you, Mr. Lacy. And thank you, staff, Mr. Conrad.
Tyler, on your 5 conditions, and one is existing conditions and user comfort. How do you build into the matrix user comfort? Did you poll people? Did you just assume? Because a lot of people I speak to are very uncomfortable now on certain roads in Colwood because they've been narrowed. And you only have to look at the curbs and the medians to see how many people have driven into them, especially the scallops. And there's the median now on Latoria, the leading edge is all broken out where somebody has driven into it. So I'm getting from a lot of people I'm speaking to, they're very uncomfortable driving on Latoria because they're driving at 40 kilometers an hour, which is the posted speed, so close to parked cars. So how do you build that into the matrix?
Absolutely, and we have a slide for that, thankfully. So for user comfort, here's an example of, existing conditions is in user comfort is the title of the, I believe there's 7 different criteria that fall under that. But the first one that might speak most to your question was existing condition. So this is one objective way of how we look at the user's comfort. So if you're on a local road, there's less facilities such as sidewalks, bike lanes, and ability for pedestrians to safely traverse the network. Yeah, please, sorry.
If I may, Chair. I think it's important the lens that this matrix is using is vulnerable road users and their comfort. So it's not about people in vehicles. This whole initiative is transportation safety initiative. While there may be instances where unsafe situations arise relative to whatever it might be, geometry of an intersection, somebody for a vehicle, the vast majority of the calls coming in and what's being applied to this will be active transportation, whether it be pedestrians or cyclists. So that's the lens that this is using. Taking into account, we've had this conversation quite a few times. There's 2 schools of thought. The narrowing of lanes does slow down cars, and it is a traffic calming. It makes it uncomfortable for the driver, more uncomfortable for the driver, which is meant to then slow them down to protect pedestrians and cyclists. So all of these criteria that we're going through, it's through the lens of the infrastructure that we're looking to install, which is protecting and advancing cycling in our community and walking inside of our community. So I think I take your point to be, are vehicles supposed to be accounted for in this, and are they feeling safe? And these lenses are more around active transportation, cyclists, and pedestrians.
Thank you, Josh. Councillor Day. Missed it.
There we go. I was just wondering, because the walk and roll map I have seen before, and it's beneficial in that it also captures accessibility for people who have mobility issues as well. And part of the issue with almost all of our active transportation is that, we have it in a few places, but then it will be, a partial, because we're really still just getting going on creating more accessible communities for active transportation. So I'm just wondering if there shouldn't also be an assist factor in your matrix for completing a longer stretch, if you get my meaning. Is when the CRD started looking at active transportation for Colwood, they mapped out what were the routes, the desirable routes through Colwood. So in those days, we identified some of the shortcuts that are beneficial, like on Machosen Road, when you go over Souk Road, that you can stay on Machosen, you can shortcut through the cemetery and get to Aldine, not Aldine, it's Meaford on the other side there. And so, I mean, you can effectively go diagonally by active transportation through our community and be safer with less interactions through some of those routes. So I'm just wondering how we can capture that work that I think we've already probably done or has already been mapped out and include, you know, in our matrix if it completes a portion of, you know, this route or that route, that's a, you know, plus 10 bonus points or whatever.
Like the old Yahtzee bonus. I like it. Let's go to Don. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in listening to some of the objectivity and subjectivity within the room tonight, I would suggest that you can manage a lot of that as well as your priorities through your weighting. I having done this many times over my career and putting these in place in various organizations, you want to keep the criteria fairly small overall. You don't want to be adding more criteria in or more groupings. It will take you longer to actually go through that, and it'll get down to the point where all you're doing is working a lot of time on the staff's part to really have a subjective decision in the end. So you can manage a lot of the city priorities or the community priorities through your weighting, and you can change your weighting over time, but still keeping the same criteria. I'm in the education space right now, so we do the same thing. Is we have a new academic plan, we have a 3-year plan, we have a 10-year plan, and those all have different weightings depending on where we are within the organization and the journey of our various programs. So I'd suggest you don't want to be adding a lot more of these. Well, if you go this way, you get extra 10 points, no disrespect, but it's just you can manage that through your defined weightings as compared to trying to add in extra qualifiers. It really does make it a lot simpler. And even when you take it to council, I highly recommend you go through a full explanation and demonstration of everything and how you come about it, how you walk through it, and then give criteria on how you review the information. And then that also helps you with your final decision as compared to, how did you say, Councillor Day, that the passionate listing versus what the community is looking for. Because one passionate councillor may sway what the greater need for the community might be. And I'm not saying that in disrespect or anything. It's just that you're going to have that in that conversation. Like I say, I've been doing this for 30 years, doing exactly what you did here, starting through, and I have a lot of experience in what works and what doesn't.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad.
Josh, in reply to what you were saying, if we look at any road, it serves pedestrians, either walking, jogging, skateboarding, serves transit, and it serves transportation vehicles. I don't know how you can look at a roadway and say we are not considering vehicles when we create this matrix and it'll come later. I think you've got to look at the whole picture. And if you're making it comfortable for pedestrians and cyclists, and you're making it uncomfortable for drivers, you're not serving the greater good of the whole, because there's more people driving than there is walking, cycling, jogging, or taking transit. And even though they say more people are going on to transit, which may be true, the number of vehicles going on our roads is going up exponentially. So if transit goes up 3%, vehicles are probably going up 15 or 20%. We only have to look at our roads right now to see that. So I think you have to look at the whole picture and just not a portion of it. Because if you're making drivers uncomfortable, they become nervous, and that's where you get accidents. And as I said, you only have to drive up Latoria now to look at the number of tires on the scallops and the medians. And that's an indication that someone has swerved or done something to hit that. And then that's dangerous because they could lose control of their vehicle and then be up on the sidewalk. So I think my advice is to look at the whole picture, just not one part of it. If you're making one part comfortable and the other part uncomfortable, I don't think you've met the goal.
Thank you, Roger. I just want to clarify one thing, just in case I came across wrong. We're certainly not ignoring vehicles in our design or our assessments of treatments here. We're talking about concerns coming from the public relative to their safety as vulnerable road users. So that'd be cyclists and pedestrians relative to getting hit by cars. Statistically speaking, people getting hit by cars is a lot more dangerous and the consequence a lot higher than a car hitting a median or a car hitting a car. So there is a level of hierarchy relative to vulnerable users in the community and them voicing their opinions of that. Now, when we come back into treatments, so we look at, are we going to design a sidewalk in this community? Are we going to design a protected bike lane or a buffered bike lane? That's when, of course, we would take the whole picture into account and look at our design guidelines and our geometry and say, okay, an appropriate road width here for a vehicle is this. Now, understanding your point is you don't agree that road widths are appropriate. That's your opinion, and I appreciate that. But we would go to design guidelines to say, for this local road, for this arterial road, the cross sections that have been brought to council and approved by council, that's what we would implement. So we're not saying we're ignoring vehicles when we look at this matrix. We are evaluating safety of vulnerable road users, bringing those concerns through the matrix, bringing those possible projects and upgrades to our community, to our council, and council will then direct us to go and design them. So when we come back with the designs is when we have that conversation about, is it appropriately suiting all users, which I think is your point. Thank you.
Mr. Dole.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Some of the, I guess what I think I'm hearing from my colleagues here is we're still gonna get to make decisions, aren't we? Like the humans in the room, we're not gonna hand it over to some dispassionate algorithm. I think you guys have addressed that to me. Yeah. So, how do we design something that takes personalities out, removes biases, and still allows people to come to the table and see that there are things that will naturally go to the top if you just did a gut feel. But this is a more accurate way of doing it. But what I heard you guys say is we're still going to allow people to make the decision, because really what we're talking about, and I've done things like this too. Yeah, which trade show do we go to? Which advertising do I choose and which don't I? And you get to the point where, we have to make tough decisions with limited resources. So I think this is just another great tool. And I think you guys have alleviated my concerns that yes, this will still be brought to counselors who can have priorities, and I'll call them thematic priorities. I like the one about schools. I'm 100% behind that. How do we say, wow, these were really close? And you're like, well, it's not close if schools matter to us. A 32 beats a 31 every time. And whether we add extra scoring or not, I think we're still going to have people make the decisions in the end. So anyways, thanks for doing this. I think it's a great tool. I'm 100% behind it.
Before you sign off, Mr. Doyle, I did hear the workings of emotion uttered there. Why don't you flush that out a little bit?
Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah, I would, based on, and we can still have more discussion, of course, but I would advance the motion to accept, yes, that the, as written in the new business, I would be willing to advance that motion.
Sorry, specifically, I was thinking an amendment because it's come up a couple of times now
Right.
for schools and parks. So if you would like to suggest an amendment to the staff motion,
I'm not, I mean, I'm not totally comfortable doing that because I don't know how you would, whether that's actionable in the matrix or not, in the matrix. It sounds so funny saying it. Yeah, actually, I'm not comfortable exactly making a motion that says, yes, well, okay, yes, we like this, but can you add something into the algorithm that provides additional scoring for, things related to schools or parks? But I feel that's perhaps in this, so maybe you guys might want to comment on that.
thank you, Mr. Doyle. I'm sure we can be a little more concise, but how does staff feel about some direction with regard to weighted scoring for treatments around schools and parks?
That truly is the piece that we're looking for council.
Okay.
So I can really appreciate that through this conversation, it seems schools would be elevated to the top.
Okay.
There might be some other pieces that are there. I would be a little anxious if we tried to actually in here try to determine what that
Okay, I
weighted
got
piece
you.
was
Yep.
or where we went with it.
Thank
I
you.
think highlighting the need for council to consider looking at their strategic plan, looking at their OCP, looking at these many other pieces of policy that kind of dovetail into this conversation and saying, we'd like staff to come back with some consideration with regards to how we would weight 1, 2, or 3 of these criterias to make them more important than others so that they're reflected. The key is to do it before we start looking at the projects because it then becomes subjective, right?
Thank you.
Let's not look at the projects, let's look at the thinking and the philosophy behind it and then figure out which ones rise to the top. Give it to staff to try to put some math to it and how it elevates. And if you can somehow
Thank
say schools first, parks second, whatever next, that would be great. Or just the 2 or even just the 1.
Thank you.
And let council figure that
I
out.
think we got the flavor. And Madam Corporate Officer, what I heard was an amendment that would reflect an increase or an elevated priority for treatments near schools and parks for staff to report back. I'm sure you can flesh that out better and maybe put it up while we continue the discussion. So we'll move to discussion, and I think Mr. Lacy, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just had another question regarding like lower hanging fruit. So some projects that are more convenience and comfort related that aren't directly related to safety. Just wondered where they stand with this new evaluation tool. I can just think of in my area in South Wishart around Kelly and Wishart and Addy Road. There's some higher curbs like that are kind of difficult for wheelchair users and mobility scooter people to use. And there's multiple maze gates that run through pathways that are hard to navigate. Some pedestrian crossings that have a bit of gravel and curbs that are kind of obstructing them. Say Herm Williams Park, there's 3 different accesses. One's a maze gate, one is an opening gate, and then the other entrance is just a bollard. So one entrance I can't get in with my bike, and then another entrance I've seen people trying to get the gate open that are using a wheelchair. It's quite difficult. I just wondered for those really small projects that are kind of definitely not as significant as some of the other safety issues, where they stand with this, with the budgeting. Like,
They're on their own. That is, I mean,
Orphan children.
previous to this matrix, it was really just call, issue your concern. We would look at it. We would perhaps elevate it through a program to council and make a decision on a one-off. Or we'd look at it with an objective opinion about, okay, well, it doesn't have enough traffic or it doesn't have enough speed, and we'd put a traffic counter out there and all those things. So a lot of those projects you mentioned were more convenience with regards to community accessibility and those types of things. So that from a user group perspective would be somebody would elevate it and say, you know, my grandfather or my parents just moved into the neighborhood and they have scooters, but they can't go through that maze. Can you look at it? And some of those smaller type projects, when we're in the $1,000, $2,000 range, those kinds of projects, that's where we have enough I'll say flexibility within our maintenance programs. I mean, in public works, our budgets are in the millions. So something like that, if it meets the needs of several users, then that's where, okay, if we've got, some funding left over, that's just something that can be accomplished to help out the community. So a lot of times we can clean those up when we're asked, as opposed to try to put a program together.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. And I think it's fair to say that the budget for all of this stuff goes far beyond $100,000. So this isn't an all or nothing proposition. Madam Corporate Chair or Madam Corporate Officer, sorry. When you're ready, we'll go to Councillor Day discussion.
Thanks. I just thought of one last thing that I hadn't thought of before when we were discussing all users using the roadway and safety being the priority. Something that I didn't see in the matrix and hasn't been considered otherwise is sightlines. So quite often we're stuck with the roadways we get with the scrubby trees or bushes or whatever else that was already in place there. And we haven't necessarily done any evaluation of sightlines. And sightlines are greatly impactful to safety, collision avoidance, etc. I'm just wondering if that is something that we should or could consider, or is there a program already in place?
All right, thank you for your question. Sightlines is an interesting one for something like vertical sightlines and horizontal. It is quite a bit more of a engineering calculation to determine that. We're trying to make this program so that any member of our staff can take in a concern and run it through the matrix, and we don't need to do sort of complex geometry calculation and send people out to do that. That being said, we do have a criteria, and that's criteria number 3, obstruction, where we've tried to make this and encapsulate this concern about sightlines. So for example, in criteria number 3 is where we account for natural obstacles, curves, and parked cars. And determining whether someone that's on the roadway is obstructed with their sightline by a car or any other type of obstruction less than the SSD, which is the stopping sight distance. That's a very easy calculation for us to do, determining the vehicle speed, and that we can determine if there's obstructions to sight lines within the roadway. So we have, in a roundabout way, I guess, been able to encapsulate sight lines. Yeah, that's all.
I appreciate that complicated kind of explanation. I do understand that sightlines are likely going to be fairly onerous to determine. Yeah, I guess I'll just, since my mic is still on, I'd just like to mention that the particular consideration be given to areas surrounding schools. I think that we get that. I don't think anybody would miss something that's right by a school, but I think, and that's in the criteria, but what we might miss is the safe routes to school or the routes that lead to where the crossing guards are, where they have particularly difficult areas to navigate, like crossing Soup Road or crossing the Chosen Road. Those are the areas where adjacent to that, I'd like to make it more comfortable for users to get to that point so that it's more obvious. So that's what I would propose as a potential amendment, that particular consideration be given to areas surrounding schools or safe routes to schools.
Mr. Doyle, are you good with that as a friendly amendment to your amendment, so we don't get into sub-amendments?
Yeah, I was.
Hang on a sec, I turned you on here. There you go. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at your scoring matrix. If we say, and further consideration be given to schools and safe routes when evaluating, et cetera, why wouldn't we just take criteria number 9 and double it? Like 6 points if it's fronting school, 4 if it's, you know, to your point, and if it's in a catchment area. Like, I mean, we're not designing this today, but is that what you guys might do with our thing here? Is you'll just go and say, we've now made this a double point score? Okay.
I think their wish
All right.
was we were trying to stay away from being
From designing
specific.
it today.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're either gonna suggest a doubling or a tripling or a quadrupling of a criteria of 1, 2, 3, that, or just, you know, we do try to be, I guess, consistent. So we spend, well, when I say we, I mean Jennifer and Tyler, spent a significant amount of time trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like? How do we turn something into a 0? So if you really scrutinize the matrix, there's some that probably would be not applicable, but we made those zeros just so we could have 0, 1, 2, 3. So we didn't have like 0 and 1 and 3 and 2. And so we may not get into, say, going, okay, instead of 1, 2, 3, we'll go 2, 5, 9 or 2, 5, 7. So I anticipate that we'd probably look at a weighting structure and say these are a little higher. And then it's a matter of, do we just multiply them by 2 or multiply them by 3? And then we'd probably then look at, okay, let's look at a few scenarios. And that's what we'll run, because we've got 99 of these, and go, okay, we know what they look like using the lens of safe schools and safe routes. What does the multiplying of 3? Does it skew it so bad that the only thing that gets done is school related and nothing else gets done?
Gotcha.
Which is okay, but it may not serve the entire community. So you may not want it to get too much of a weighting, but enough to make it worthwhile so that's where we'll kind of run it through and see what it looks like when we come back.
Thank you. The only thing I heard Mr. Doyle say, Madam Corporate Officer, is parks in there. I don't see any reference to parks there. Am I correct, Mr. Doyle? Yeah, there was. Right. So if we can work that into somewhere, perfect. Thank you. And Mr. Ostergaard.
Good evening again. Okay, so from my own personal opinion, I believe the additional amendment doesn't serve the rest of the community properly. I think you have the ability to weight your criteria with the criteria from the council when you're presenting it and things like schools. But now we're saying, okay, oh, wait, let's put parks in. Oh, wait, there's gravel on the side of the road. We better put that in as well. So you've got to be careful on all these criteria and running this down. You can gain the same thing by not having that consideration be in place and actually have staff wait on your OCP, your transportation plan, your master transportation plan. You can direct them to say, take the criteria and the weighting and the priorities that we have in those documents and policies and apply them to the weighting and the weighting against the criteria you have, and you will actually gain the same thing without limiting yourself to actually saying that. Because the next time someone comes up and says there's something new, you will have to come back to this and actually say, oh, we need to prioritize that and add that in there as well. I would suggest that once they go through the work and present, you can have that conversation at council that you'll be able to put your concerns such as schools, which is a very valid concern, parks, safe routes, those are all very valid concerns, but they can be managed through the criteria through the weighting of the criteria that are already there. And they can work that through without limiting yourself to actual specific words and starting to wordsmith the recommendation.
Thank you. And your points are well taken. I think I heard it from staff too, and they're alive to the fact that we're going to want to do projects elsewhere in the community, not just around our school. So, but I think from a council perspective, I would like to hear what they have to report back. And they might say, this doesn't work. Here's the reasons why, because we're never going to move away from a school to do anything. So I think I take your point, and I think staff hear you and I hear you. Thank you.
Just a quick question, because I guess I've been assuming that once you've run the potential projects based on heat map, community requests, whatever the reason is that they get on our radar, they're going to run through this matrix, which is very objective in its approach. And it is then going to come back to committee or council to have the subjective layer added on after the fact? Is that what we're expecting? Yeah, okay, perfect. Because
Sorry, I should answer because we're being videotaped and my nodding of the head isn't going to get there. So yes, that's correct. I mean, the intention is council's going to see some projects and again, your subjectivity is going to come in that there might be a crosswalk that comes in at 30 and there might be a bike lane that comes in at 10. And that bike lane that comes in at 10 may provide a real piece of connectivity with some other projects that we're doing that aren't part of this. And council might say, you know what, we want to elevate this 10 bike lane over this 30 crosswalk this year because we think it's important to finish that connectivity piece off. So that's where that subjectivity comes in, but it allows you to just weigh those objectively with regards to where you get to on the criteria. So that's where council would definitely have the ability to alter that and just know those numbers are there. Because with the 4 criteria, it's very likely you might have crosswalks always end up in the 30s and bike lanes are always in the 10s. So at some point, you're going to have to say, we've done 3 crosswalks, now let's do a bike lane.
and we also don't have any input here from people with disabilities who I think rightly deserve it. There is a hand up by Tim.
That out. And I see Taylor with a hand up, so I think we'll go to you now. Go ahead and turn your screen on if you choose.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening. Yeah, I just wanted to have a question, maybe a comment too. Obviously, this matrix is meant to reduce subjectivity, and we've been talking around when subjectivity is introduced and not. But in my mind, subjectivity is readily introduced when we open up the matrix and add to the matrix or amend the matrix. And so I guess I'm wondering, once this is implemented, what is the cycle look like in terms of being able to add, to amend, change the criteria that we are using? Or is it kind of set in stone once it's in place? Because again, that's when subjectivity could be added in beyond council doing it.
Thank you for the question. At the end of the day, council's prerogative to change this matrix and or eliminate this matrix at any time. I would suggest that likely triggers would be an election. A new council comes in and has a different viewpoint with regards to where their priorities lie. Anytime a master plan is changed significantly by the community and council wants that master plan change to be reflected within this matrix. So when an OCP is completed or the transportation master plan gets completed, documents of that nature that would have significant impact with regards to the amenities that we're discussing tonight, that would probably be the time and the trigger that might have this change. So there's probably about 3 answers that I could give you. And then of course, anytime somebody thinks it doesn't work from an elected official point of view, if there's something they think we're missing, then I'm sure that would be brought to our attention and we bring it back to them for consideration.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Taylor?
No, I think it sounds pretty clear there. And generally speaking, it's approved, it's in place. It's not going to be changed unless it's directed by council or ultimately a recommendation from staff with direction from council. But otherwise, it's what we're approving and the criteria that it's being approved with or what it will go forward with. So that clears it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Conrad.
2 quick questions you could probably explain on existing conditions, where you have 3, you have no facility on bike, sidewalk, crosswalk, and traffic calming. Could you explain that? And the other one, while I'm on Mike, in conflict points, crosswalks, you have non-applicable. So I'd like to know why, especially crosswalks and the conflict are not applicable.
Okay, so I'll start with conflict points. So that one was identified not applicable in terms of when we're looking at a section. I'll start with sidewalks. Does that section of roadway go across an intersection? So that just gives a weighting on the severity of an occurrence of a occurrence between a vehicle and a vulnerable road user. A crosswalk will go across a roadway and not be crossing, I guess. I mean, it's always at an intersection or mid-block, and I'm gonna wait for John to respect.
I think what Tyler's trying to say is that conflict point is just when you're having a crossing point. So a driveway, for instance, somebody backing out of a driveway across the sidewalk, that's a conflict point. Somebody pulling out of a laneway past the bike lane, that's a conflict point. What isn't a conflict point with regards to crosswalks is the whole intention of the crosswalk is to stop the conflict, which is through traffic. And therefore, there's no conflict to have because we know that's what that is for, is because we know there's conflicts in that roadway and we're stopping that roadway. So it doesn't apply with regards to just that conflict aspect for that one particular criteria. Does that make sense?
Certainly doesn't mean there will never be a conflict in a crosswalk.
It's consistently has a conflict, so it's not applicable for the criteria.
Thank you. I would like to steer us. Sorry, let me press your button again, Mr. Conrad. We'll get it on the record. Thanks.
Existing conditions. I don't understand what it says, 3, no facility, no facility, no facility, mid-block, no facilities. So does that mean there's not a store, there's nothing there? What does that mean?
Yeah, thank you for your question. This specific criteria is in reference to infrastructure for vulnerable road users. So 0 is there's a protected bike lane. If we're just speaking about bike lanes section, there's a protected bike lane present. 1 point if there's a buffered bike lane present, 2 painted, and then 3 is just if there's nothing present, which would identify that someone using the roadway would feel less comfortable as they're not within, for example, a 0 where there's a protected bike lane there. It's for that specific user or that category.
You're messing with her screen?
And this is the scoring guide here. So the top picture is an example where you would see a sidewalk present if we're looking under the sidewalk facility treatment. And the bottom picture is where you don't see a sidewalk present. And that just speaks to how comfortable a person is if they were wanting to traverse the roadway as a pedestrian.
Thank you, Tyler. Have we flogged this enough? I see fewer lights. So Mr. Doyle made the put forward the motion, but also with the amendment, as I recall. No seconder is required. Any final thoughts or questions? Thank you so much. And I'd like to call the question. Anyone opposed? Thank you, Mr. Ostegard. Sorry, notice. Sorry. Okay, so hang on, let's back up. I'm going to separate these two, Madam Corporate Officer. So we'll back up just a little bit. Let's start with the amendment. So the amendment introduced by Mr. Doyle to the staff recommended motion was considering an increased scoring on the bottom bullet there to areas surrounding park schools, safe routes to schools. That's the amendment, the suggested amendment. So let's call the question on that. Opposed to that amendment? Thank you. So do you have that? Hold your hands up for a sec. I think she's got it. Perfect. 2, 3. So that motion, sorry, that amendment passes. Now back to the main motion. The staff motion as presented before you, to the first 3 bullets, moved once again by Mr. Doyle. I'd like to call the question. Anyone opposed? None opposed. Thank you so much. And I think that is about it. Someone for adjournment? Anyone opposed to an adjournment? Thank you, Mr. Ostegard, for the adjournment. And I'm sure no, is anyone opposed? No, I don't see any. Thank you so much. And I'll consider that a wrap. Thank you so much. Thank you, staff.